Thank you, Senator Sasse. We love your passion, and we especially love your faithfulness and your wisdom in sharing with us from such a wide swath of sociology and history and Bible and theology. It's exactly what we were hoping to hear, and we're very much grateful for it. We have just a few minutes where I'm going to ask him a few questions and just try to dig in on a couple of these specific topics. Why is it so difficult for Christians to be able to resist that tribalism, that cable TV? We should have those kinds of dense networks within our local churches, within our communities, and yet that tends not to characterize Christians' public witness, especially as it relates to politics. Why do we have such a hard time with that?
I don't know, and I'm new to this, and I'm worried because it is an experiential 24 months I've had that were different than what I expected. I'll say this, and I know we have limited time, so I don't want to say something this big and depressing and not have time to redeem it and unpack it further, but I do find that Christian engagement in politics right now doesn't look as different from the world as I think that it should. And I think if we knew more Christians that live in places where there's even less common grace benefit, it would probably shake us out of our comfort at easily over-identifying the kingdom with our own age, our own nation, our own political program. But we should celebrate and be grateful for all the common grace gifts we have. But brothers and sisters, what a dangerous thing it is for us to identify the kingdom of God with a particular political program. Obviously, part of it is just that the sociology that our whole nation of 320 million is experiencing is something that our brothers and sisters are experiencing too. It isn't just that Americans are lonely, we're lonely. It is a strange thing to go from the rootedness of community that we've inherited from grandparents and parents to go to a place that has a lot of rootlessness. I'll say one sort of word picture of how to think about this. Alexis de Tocqueville, trying to describe America to Europeans in the 1830s and 40s, said that the Rotary Club is the fundamental way to understand what America means. If you want a picture of America, it's not isolated individualism, but it's also not government-defined community. It's community, but it's voluntarist relational community. The Rotary Club was his picture. Obviously, the Rotary International, headquartered in Evanston, Illinois, didn't exist then. But as a picture of not-for-profit assemblies where you try to persuade people to join your projects and to buy your products, that was his picture of America. Right now, Americans are stuck or they're mobile. And yet the Rotary, which is sort of a staple of rural America and of a lot of cities, the Rotary is dying in Appalachia, and it's not being reborn in Exurbia right now. And that unsettled disruption that people feel in their souls is leading them to project a kind of tribalism on politics which claims it can answer those worries.
Was there a particular moment where you realized that things were far different from what you expected, maybe for Christians in particular, or in politics in general, where this really brought it home to you?
I feel like Collin is setting me up. For those of you who are on social media at all, I'm relatively active on Twitter. @BenSass is me, personally. It's not my staff. I'm a dad who commutes with little kids, and lots of funny stuff happens in our life. And so I'm relatively active on Twitter, but I don't try to engage on politics much. That happens in my day job. But because I was a skeptic of both presidential candidates in the last presidential election, I ended up seeing sort of an underbelly of America that I hadn't expected. That being skeptical that neither political party is advancing a lot of truth-telling in American life led to a whole bunch of things I hadn't expected in terms of, threats on your safety and all sorts of racial claims about America that I'd never really experienced. And it led to different government authorities thinking they needed to come to my house and secure it, because I'm skeptical of politics. I think all Christians are rightly skeptical of politics. You don't have to express it exactly the way I do, and you can be a zealous precinct walker for the political candidate of your choice. Obviously, I ran for office, so I'm not a separatist isolationist that says free public engagement, but I do think while we don't flee it, we have to engage in a meaningful way that doesn't lead anyone to believe that our hope would be in these politics. And so the last 2 years has been instructive for me as I realized that if you say Washington shouldn't be your God, and some people respond that they want to kill you, that's a surprise.
Certainly revealing of that idol that you're describing as well. You've given us a lot to think through, a lot to chew on. Give us a reading list of some other places that we should go to be able to dig in deeper on some of these things. Certainly you mentioned de Tocqueville a number of different times, so Democracy in America would be one example, I would assume. What are some other things that we can go and read, and perhaps we can then share with other people in our congregations?
Oh, that's a great question. Can I mostly take a rain check and say I will, over the course of the next 3 or 4 days, give this thought and I will tweet some of it?
Okay, that's
but
great.
I'll name some categories here. As a historian, I do think that we're disconnected as a culture from American history and American civics. And I think that's a big, big problem. Pollsters will say that now 41% of Americans under age 35 think the First Amendment is dangerous. Yeah. Think about that. Nearly half of people under age 35 think the First Amendment is dangerous because you might use your free speech to say something that would hurt someone else's feelings. Actually, that's pretty part and parcel to the meaning of America. Our founding fathers and mothers differed on the nature of heaven and hell and decided to create a framework for ordered liberty where we could differ about really essential things, existential things, things far more important than politics. And politics was us defending each other's right to be wrong. We could argue about theology in the public square, and we could shout at each other, maybe over dinner, politely, maybe in the public square, angrily sometimes, but we wanted to protect each other's rights to differ. We've lost that civics. We don't have a sense of American cultural catechesis, American history. I think that the economic moment that we're at that is so disrupted, people have to understand, and especially the ministers among us, have to understand that so much of what people are anxious about that has all these epiphenomenal effects in their communities and in their families and in terms of moral breakdown has to do with the undermining of the durability of work. And we're going to create people, we're going to have to create people who can get new jobs at 40 and 45 and 50 when technology disintermediates their last job. And we should talk about that truthfully, not disingenuinely, as mostly what's happening in our trade discussions. Again, I'm a free trader, but I don't here assume that any of you have to agree with me about free trade. But it simply isn't the case that the disruption of most people's jobs right now is driven by trade. It's mostly driven by technology. And people don't have categories to understand what's going to happen when automation makes the average duration at a job shorter and shorter. So historical theology is the crown jewel of what we should all be reading. But a little bit of American history and civics and a little bit of economics about the changing nature of work. I'll tweet some of that out later this week.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book that's coming out?
So I have a book project, but because I am here not traveling in that office, there are a whole bunch of ethical lines that I don't want to cross. But I'll just tell you something that I've been worried about that drives my angst about where we are as a country, and that drives a lot of Melissa and my agenda as we try to figure out how to prioritize in the raising of our own kids. Again, our girls are 15 and 13 and our boy is 5, and I commute with one of them most weeks. Pretty much I get home on Friday night and my wife tells me which of the 3 she's most annoyed with, and they become my travel companion for the next week. I had, in the midst of a culture that's disrupted and in the midst of a politics that's tipping toward idolatry, I had a wonderfully encouraging experience last spring. My 15-year-old daughter, then 14-year-old, she works. We do hybrid homeschooling, and she's on the road with me, and she has jobs. In Nebraska, you can get your driver's license at age 14, so she often runs her siblings to different events for school and for sports and for music. So she's a worker as far as a 14-year-old can be at a time when our households are really separated from labor. And so as a kid who grew up walking beans and detasseling corn, and who believes that if you don't have a yearning to wake up by 4 or 4:30 in the morning, there's probably something wrong in our soul. I had a grandfather who told me when I was a kid that every hour of sleep before midnight was worth 2 hours of sleep after midnight. And I believed him. And so I want to go to work at 4 a.m. and I want my kids to want to go to work at 4 a.m. and we live among the richest people in human history, and I'm worried that my kids are accidentally spoiled as much as we try to guard against it. And so Nebraska and Texas battle to be the largest cattle states in the union, and Nebraska, we're the largest cattle state in the union, but whatever, it depends on your metric. We have a big calving season every late February to mid-April, and a whole bunch of baby cows are born on ranches all over Nebraska, and there's a ton of work to be done. And frankly, I don't mean to say this inappropriately in a mixed audience where you're about to get to devotions, but baby cows are a lot about poop. Like it's sort of like when Melissa and I first had kids and we realized that so much of raising kids was about bodily functions that we didn't realize were so central to life. Raising cows and birthing cows, there's just a lot of stuff there. And we sent our 14-year-old off to live on a cattle ranch for a month last spring. And the ranch she was at had 600 mamas, and about half of them delivered in the month that Corey was living on this ranch. And she's like day 2 on the job. And this 25-year-old ranch hand gal says to my daughter, okay, here's where we get the rubber gloves that go up to our shoulder. And my daughter has eyes that are the size of saucers, and she realizes she might lose a watch today. Like, this wasn't something she knew was coming. And she starts texting me over the course of every day, just the ick factor of a 14-year-old girl helping deliver baby cows. And these texts were just too good to let evaporate into the ether. And so I started converting my daughter's texts to tweets. And I just made up this hashtag from the ranch. And it was mostly just because I thought it was funny. Like I didn't have any grand purpose in this. And I tweeted out 3 or 4 times a day texts that I'd get from my daughter as she's discovering a work ethic, delivering cows on this ranch. Here's the good news. For the next 60 days as I traveled Nebraska, and again, this is March and April last year. This is in the middle of a presidential campaign where I'm skeptical of both parties in a state that the president ended up winning by a lot. And so there were a lot of people that might have been frustrated and were frustrated with my political skepticism of both of these parties. And yet, almost everywhere I went in Nebraska for those 2 months, the only thing people wanted to talk about was my daughter suffering on that ranch. And they were reading the texts, and the Wall Street Journal ended up doing a story on my daughter's coming of age, discovery of a work ethic. And people would literally come up to me. I'd make speeches that were on policy or healthcare reform or tax policy or whatever, and a crowd would form as the event would break up. And all these people would be in line saying, please don't leave. We need you to help us figure out how we can make our kids suffer too. Everywhere I would go, and I know we need to wrap up, but everywhere I would go, people were saying what I believe to be true about Americans, but that we don't have a lot of shared discourse on screaming cable TV news, where every 2 minutes there's a new cryon at the bottom saying breaking news, breaking news, breaking news on every channel. And a lot of times it's not just not breaking news, it's some opinion columnist's commentary on some news story from yesterday about the wrong news story from the day before. That's not breaking news. And yet Americans' worries in their soul were about transmitting a culture and a republic of virtue to the next generation. They were interested in the work ethic, and that's really hopeful. And I've thought about it enough that I decided to write up some of it, and some of that will be out soon, but we'll leave that bracketed for today.
Well, from one farm kid to another, thank you, Senator
God
Sasse.
bless. Thanks
We're
for
very
having me.
grateful. Thanks, Senator Sasse.